This is amazing. Like, this will never get ported to Switch. The PC is clearly the better platform, even for this form factor. The Nintendo Switch is like $300? That's different. How is it different? The whole economics of consoles are different. Why? Valve is making like a PC-based handheld for $400? Okay, first, that's a rumor. Second, Valve is the only company that can potentially pull that off. Maybe we should have started with that instead of spending all this time recording this bit.
Gaming is, most of the time, amazing. It's a beautiful marriage of art and technology, and few mediums show it as well as PC gaming. To me, the most magical thing about PC gaming is its flexibility. In no other place, you can find a gaming platform that, for some setups, looks like this and plays like this, and then we have a low-spec setup like this, where games can be scaled down and still work. While a base PC system is pretty standardized, there's a lot of unique and weird configurations out there. I talk a lot about unique low-power hardware on this channel, and I'm constantly fascinated by handhelds with integrated graphics. Based on how often those are some of my most popular videos, it seems a lot of you are very interested as well. And why not? After all, one of my objectives when I started this channel was to extend the idea of what PC gaming can do beyond high graphics and to show why low-end performance matters. And this is a pretty catchy way to do that. And it also makes for a great Instagram post, but that's neither here nor there. There's one problem though, which a lot of you have identified. These devices are so freaking expensive. This unshakable notion likely comes from comparing it to its closest analog, the Nintendo Switch, and realizing how astonishing the chasm between their pricing is. For the price of a Win 3 or an Aya Neo, you can often get a Switch Lite and an Xbox Series S, and depending on price fluctuation, you might even get half a game. Not a full game though, you will still need the money for the DLCs and microtransactions, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Given that there's an obvious incentive for these companies to figure out a way to make their devices cheaper, especially in light of the growing competition in each, how is it that they all end up being around the same price? And this effect is not limited to handhelds only. Technically, both of these handhelds are primarily made from laptop components, and curiously enough, when you look up laptops with similar specs, their prices are not that different from these devices. Both the GPD Win 3 and the Aya Neo have pretty standard laptop-like pricing. In fact, have you ever noticed how every time something really different or interesting comes along on PC, it tends to come with a high price point attached? It's not like weird innovations in consoles are cheap, but the console market tends to be more price sensitive than PCs. Console makers are less afraid of cutting corners to make things cheaper. How is it that a platform that usually provides one of the cheapest entry points to gaming is simultaneously the most expensive for anything just slightly different? The answer to this is linked to just how the gaming industry and tech in general operates fundamentally. And understanding the mechanics that works is quite the journey. So let's get started. I am LowSpecGamer. Welcome to the show, brought to you by the Nebula and Curiosity Stream Bundle. Part 1. Having money is cheaper. One of the most interesting effects of a complex, over-industrialized world is that if a production process is effective enough, the more units of a thing you produce, the more it spreads out the cost of production. In other words, for a lot of industrial goods, the more units you fabricate, the cheaper each unit is to manufacture. This effect allows big companies with big orders of a single device to be able to aggressively compete in pricing. In fact, when I talked to Evan Upton, one of the co-creators of the Raspberry Pi, a few years ago, this was one of the reasons for the improvements of Pi computers over the years, while keeping a similar price point. As the Pi becomes more popular, they made larger and larger orders for the boards, and they could secure each component for the board at a lower price. This is also one of the big advantages console makers have. Having an established user base of millions can give Nintendo, Sony and Microsoft the confidence to make a lot of these consoles for a reduced price. And the more consoles they make over time, the cheaper it becomes. Now this turns into a disadvantage for any startup trying to make a mainstream product, as they usually will not have the capital nor the established fanbase to ensure orders of tens of millions of units. Something like a GPD or Aya device requires custom tooling, which is costly and is going to be spread out between fewer devices. And all of the off-shelf parts like buttons, sticks, batteries, memory and CPU have to be ordered in smaller batches, which increases the cost per unit. You can also see this effect in basically any weird, interesting new PC format, which rarely sell beyond niche tech circles and therefore are rarely manufactured in the numbers necessary for aggressive economies of scale to kick in. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Part 2. Why can't they just sell a thing? If you have kept an eye on the tech world, or are unfortunate enough to have hung around in startup circles in the last decade, you might know that for most companies, the big bucks are not on selling a product but on having an ecosystem. Selling a product once and hoping you sell another is an unstable and riskier strategy. Giving people a reason to consistently and recurrently spend money makes for a more scalable long-term strategy. You can see this everywhere, from the explosion of subscription services to how every large game company tries to have a live service that keeps making money rather than just selling a freaking finished video game. The hard part then becomes how to get people into the ecosystem in the first place, which is why you make the base product free or you use the projected future profits of the ecosystem to try and make the entry device as cheap as possible. Or you take the AAA approach, charge a full price for a game and then sell parts of it as an ecosystem later. Subsidizing or expecting low profits for the entry point to the ecosystem is how consoles have operated for a long time. This is why companies like Nintendo work really hard to keep a high level of control over how their games are sold, and they have been doing this since the 80s. And why the industry has such a weird relationship with used game sales as a whole, since it does not make money for the owners of the ecosystem. Laurie Wright, Vice President at Xbox Business Development, recently gave a deposition as a part of the Apple vs Epic trial, which is illuminating in this regard. If Microsoft sells consoles at a loss, why does it keep selling them? The lawyer asked. Because the business model is set up to deliver an end-to-end consumer experience and they make money in the long run over sales and subscriptions. Has Microsoft ever earned a profit on the sale of an Xbox console? The lawyer asks. No, Wright says. If Microsoft didn't take its 30% commission from developers, Wright concurs, Microsoft couldn't make money off the Xbox. Put some perspective into the really cheap Xbox Series S, huh? I explain all of this to put into focus the price of something like a Nintendo Switch, and Nintendo's historically high prices for older games. You don't really get to choose where you get your games from, and they know. The PC by definition is the weird exception in mainstream gaming. Nvidia, AMD or any hardware company out there does not get a cut of any game you buy. They just sell hardware. There's a growing number of options on where to get games, and competition can make pricing of older titles way more aggressive, and game stores have to either justify their cut or compete with lower cuts for developers. This amazing historic openness means that startups or small companies like Aya or GPD can build devices like these, and as long as they're x86 and run Windows, they have out of the gate access to a huge library of games. But they make no money from those games, so whatever money they make has to be from the initial sale, and that raises the price. Hopefully by this point you can see how this also applies to a lot of the weird expensive computer formats that we have seen through the years. Hell, if you wonder why certain companies that sell pre-built PCs push so hard for extra services like extended guarantees.
So that's the reason we are suggesting you to take the warranty.
Oh no!
This is also a reason. An example of a similar industry going through similar issues is smartphones. Long ago, I made a video with Tech Altar discussing this very topic. Have you noticed how a lot of mainstream smartphone brands insist on using their own Android flavor and push you into services they control? Hopefully, you kinda understand now what is happening. Laptops have tried doing the same by including bloatware apps or pushing you through our subscription services, but the openness of the platform fights them at every step of the way. You can just format your hard drive and reinstall Windows if it gets to it.
Now imagine a company that sells their devices for super high prices and makes a ton of money on them, but also has an ecosystem that keeps making money from them. Such a company would just be like super profitable and never stop making money, right? Help me!
Aya at least knows of this disadvantage they're facing. There's a great interview by Taki Udon to Uncle A, the founder of Aya, about the development of this device that I will link in the description, and it mentions that Aya's future ambition is to go beyond being a PC handheld and have its own ecosystem, which is ambitious, even if I'm dubious of its feasibility. Not long after that interview, Uncle A sold the Aya company to a more experienced entrepreneur, which seems to be focusing more on just taking the device to market than ecosystem ideas, so it seems this goal was as complicated as I thought. Openness is truly the PC's double-edged sword, what makes it the most interesting platform for cool ideas, and the one that is also the most inflexible. Also, there's one additional element I have not mentioned. Part 3, but can you put that in your pocket? Laptops are more expensive than desktops, no one should be surprised to hear that at this point. And yet, every single time I make a video about a portable device, there's a huge deluge of people pointing out how you can build a capable PC for the price. Making something portable requires more careful design, a more expensive CPU and GPU, and RAM that is more power efficient and produces less heat. Making stuff portable is expensive. Heck, even with all their advantages, you can see the same thing happening in consoles. However, laptops or just any other expensive niche computer have one additional advantage that handhelds do not: Part 3.5.
Can you Photoshop on an Xbox?
No.
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
There's a reason why one can usually manage to afford computers or laptops, even when they're way more expensive than consoles. Consoles are mostly for gaming, while computers are productivity devices too. Phones and tablets are rapidly improving, but still at the time of writing, if you want to do work, from serious writing and research, to calculating your taxes, to editing videos, you need a computer. So part of the cost comes from the expectation of multiple uses. Can I edit a video on something like the Aya Neo or a Wing Tree? Yes! Is it a logical thing to do? You could connect it to a dock and use it as a full-time computer. While this device is a pretty good laptop specs and tweakable TDPs, the work anywhere aspect of a laptop is just kinda gone. And with this, it becomes much harder to justify the laptop-ish cost. Will this form factor ever be better priced on PC? Maybe. A large company with deep pockets making a fuckton of these, like Tencent, could help with economies of scale, but the moment you try to limit its ecosystem to an official store, people are just going to try and root it, or find ways to just make it work with Linux or regular Windows, or if you make it completely incompatible with Windows to prevent that, then you just made another Nintendo Switch, and now you have to convince developers to port their games to it. Good luck with that. Open platform, it's a double-edged sword. So regrettably, it will take some major creative changes to make stuff like this widely accessible. Weird devices like these are the PC platform at its best and its worst, and it will take very weird economic acrobatics to make them work. There is, however, one company that could potentially have the combination of all the very specific ingredients needed to pull off the economics of such a device. When I was working on this video, the apparent news leaked that Valve is working on a handheld PC console of its own, codenamed the Steampole. When you frame this around the points I have discussed so far, some interesting observations come to light. Valve is no stranger to making hardware, let alone at scale, which means they likely have the connections and capital to mass produce its handhelds if it sees it as a viable venue. However, the more important ingredient in making a cheap handheld is the ecosystem play, and Valve might be the only company in the PC space that could, kinda, pull an ecosystem play. I am wary of making echo of any of the hardware-specific rumors of this Steampole because it perpetuates the eternal cycle of people getting excited over unrealistic expectations, but I think it is safe to assume that this device will be made from laptop components in a way similar to existing handhelds. Valve already owns the biggest, most popular platform for buying and playing PC games, so there's a pathway for making the bulk of their money from the revenue of the PC games sold through the device. However, what is stopping people from just buying their games somewhere else? Nothing. But Valve does have mechanisms to nudge people towards favoring Steam. To understand what I mean, let's look at two of my favorite pieces of Valve-made hardware, the Steam Controller and the Steam Link. For those unfamiliar, the Steam Controller is a highly customized PC-oriented controller, and the Steam Link is a box that allows you to stream games locally from your PC to the TV. Both devices are made in such a way that you can use them with any PC game there is, but they are both deeply integrated into Steam in a way that nudges you toward the platform. Meaning, to use the controller or the Link with a non-Steam game, you have to add them on Steam first, and things like the automatic community-made templates for the controller work better if the game was both on Steam. This seems silly, but for people like me who love this controller and its templates, I know, okay? It's an acquired taste. You really have to use it for a while for it to click with you. More than once I have been nudged towards buying a game on Steam instead of another platform just so it works better with my controller. Hopefully you see where this is going. By having the Steampole just integrate so tightly into Steam that it is just way more convenient to own games there, the platform can just nudge you towards their ecosystem without forcing it out of the open PC space. What is either going to be the master blow or the thing that kills it is going to be the OS. For years, Valve has pretty much been the platform that has experimented the most with Linux. Previous attempts at making hardware that works in a Linux-based Valve operating system have crashed and burned catastrophically. But since then, Valve has been quietly working on initiatives like Proton that dramatically increase the number of games that function well on Linux, putting the burden of making that work on Valve or the community, rather than the developers or publishers who likely will never be convinced to port their stuff to Linux, at least right now. A device running a custom Linux that integrates into Steam with a compatibility layer that is already pre-customized for certain games to work on it, but with the option to still install Windows if you want, but that still works better with their platform might quite possibly be the only way to push an ecosystem play on a PC handheld, if they can nudge people enough to Steam, that is.
That would be a considerably large nudge.
Just be careful when setting your expectations on pricing. Valve-made hardware has not exactly been cheap in the past. There is some precedent for companies doing interesting ecosystem plays on open formats when you look outside of gaming that I think is very revealing, but getting so far outside the topic of handhelds for a few minutes felt like a bit much. But I wanted to do it anyway, so this is the part where I tell you that this video is brought to you by CuriosityStream, and if you want to see that, you can watch it on Nebula. Do you know what is also an ecosystem? YouTube. And one problem with it is that it sort of rewards uniformity in a way that makes it very hard to approach certain topics, which is what I put it on Nebula, the booster pack of YouTube, the streaming service we creators control, where we can put extended cuts of our videos with no ads. And there's also other original content like my documentary interviewing RuneScape gold farmers in Venezuela, or my podcast capturing the origin story of creators, and you can get all of this very cheaply with one of the best bundles in video streaming. We partnered with CuriosityStream. If Nebula is about independent creator content, CuriosityStream is all about big-budget non-fiction video and documentaries. For example, one of the most frustrating original ecosystem subsidies are printers. A lot of printers are cheap because original ink cartridges are literally the most expensive liquid on Earth, which frustrates me a lot. After all, printing as a technology is one of the 5 most important technological improvements in history. And there's a great documentary called The Birth of Printing that supports why I will rank it that high. Now the good news is that you don't have to choose between ecosystems here. If you get CuriosityStream through my link in the description, you get Nebula for free and a 26% discount. So that is both services for almost $1 a month. It's crazy good value, and you're supporting the future of independent content as a whole. Go to curiositystream.com/LowSpecGamer and do it. Do it!